What's up, kinfolk? It's RJ Young. I am not on a step mill. Consider hitting the like and subscribe button because I upload a video every single day. It's always college football related, sports related. We have a good time. Today, I want to talk about Mike Norvell's Florida State team and how we're dealing with a second kind of crises. I know Florida State fans are a little bit touchy about that word, but I'm going to unpack it. I want to talk about five-star Caleb Williams and how NFL quarterbacks have evaluated him. And I want to talk a little bit about Dabo Swinney and what he had to say about a college football playoff national championship without the Big Ten or the SEC. So let's start with the news. And the news is Warren Thompson took to Twitter to tell everyone that he felt like he was being mistreated and silenced when talking about whether or not the players at Florida State were being taken care of. And he put out an open letter that he posted to his Twitter account. Now, on top of all of that, we got DJ Matthews also tweeting and deleting that he tested positive for COVID-19 and expressed real concern that he didn't feel safe in Tallahassee. Also add here that Mike Norvell's program is one of those that is going through preseason camp, that is expecting to start its season on time in the ACC, along with like Clemson, North Carolina, and the like. So Mike Norvell had a media call at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time today, where he says, among other things, it's just disappointing to see what was said. We've been very open and transparent throughout this process. We've had a voluntary camp. We've had voluntary summer access. We've been very transparent throughout all aspects, including an additional team meeting 2 nights ago in the indoor facility to discuss all issues when it comes to COVID, when it comes to our protocols and procedures. We are following those to the letter of what we have laid out. We're working through all protocols, which do include all positive tests, if that happens, and contact tracing in every area of what we're doing. That's when the players are here in the facilities, as well as the information we gather from what they're doing away from the facility. Disappointed to hear about the messages that were put out there, but we're very transparent throughout this process. And once again, we've had a voluntary policy with all our players and all of our staff throughout this camp, and all mandatory summer access. Now, he and others have spoke out and said, I don't know what Warren Thompson is talking about. Okay. Warren Thompson is wide receiver out of Sefner at Armwood. For those of you that are Oklahoma fans, you'll know that Eric Stryker came out of that same high school. But it's also just not a good look for Mike Norvell at this particular moment in his coaching career, because this is a second time for which he has been called onto the carpet for alleged mistreatment or misdiagnosing, right? His misconduct, the way that he has talked about players, the way that he's talked with players, the communication he said happened that didn't happen. And then you had Marvin Wilson, who was by far the best player at Florida State and a first-round draft pick at defensive tackle, honestly. Say, look, we didn't feel like he had represented the way that he'd been talking to us, and we're not going to practice until we come to some resolutions on this. Now, that was because he said that he talked to every player. He did not talk to every player. He sent out a mass group text, and then, some people that he reached out to, they got back to him, and so forth and so on. So they had that, and they got that squashed. Now we're back to Florida State. And what is Florida State actually going to be doing with this? Because, it sounds as if you have to listen to what Warren Thompson is saying first. You have to hear him out. And you need to get in an independent arbiter to try to figure out what the truth is here. That's not going to make Noles fans happy. I understand that. It's not going to make Mike Norvell happy. But it speaks to what has happened in the last 2 months. We're talking about 2 incidents in 2 months here, or 2 incidents in 3 months. I'm also interested to see how the rest of the players want to go about this, because with this player calling him out, and being followed by DJ Matthews, usually where there's smoke, there's fire. And you also need to understand that these players don't really have much to gain by saying that they're being mistreated. It's just, there's not much to do there. Like, anybody who's ever been injured on a football team knows that you kind of disappear, right? Anybody that speaks out against a coach usually loses playing time, those sorts of things. And if you have it out and you take it, quote unquote, to the media, which is Twitter, you invite scorn, right? Chuba Hubbard did this, put Mike Gundy on blast. Now we know who Mike Gundy is, and ends up deleting his Twitter account because of all the hate and vitriol that he later got when he wanted to see an Oklahoma County district attorney fired for his treatment of one case in particular, right? So while these concerns I think are valid and they need to be sussed out, I also think that it's really on Mike Norvell to try to make sure that the communication is streamlined at a time when communication needs to be at an all-time high. Like, we need to be setting new records for who knows what and how and when. I understand how some folks might not feel like that should happen, but that's what it is right now. And that's what it's going to have to be during this season when everybody's going to be on edge about COVID-19 and everybody is going to try to play football, or so it seems, except the Big Ten and the Pac-12. Which kind of leads me to that discussion about Dabo Swinney and what he thinks of a college football playoff that does not have the Big Ten and the Pac-12 in it. But first, I want to check on the chat, see who's in here. It's just a couple people. That's all right. Hit the like button. Yep, there's Corey. 3 folks in here. I didn't tell anybody that this was going to go on, and I haven't been. But if you've been paying attention, I've been trying to go live the last couple of days at about 1, 2 o'clock. We're still working out the kinks on what that is. And maybe it'll be a regular thing. I just think that it's fun. I think it's a way to communicate with the community here and a way to do a live show. Because, like, I do a live show 5 days a week anyway, right? I just do it on the radio. Now, as we're talking about Dabo Swinney and we're talking about Pac-12 and Big Ten sitting out the seasons, we're having this real conversation already about whether or not a playoff is going to happen, and then if a playoff champion is going to be legitimate. Bob Bosley actually was asked about this, and he said they got a call that they're going to take this week about it, and I don't expect them to come to any resolution, but if you have a playoff and you name a national champion without 14 teams in the Big Ten and 12 teams in the Pac-12, is it legitimate? Well, seeing as the Pac-12 and the Big Ten both plan to play a Rose Bowl right now, Jeff Brom and Ryan Day, and both would love the opportunity to play for a national championship, and they nothing to stop them from playing one, they'd be a national champion as well. So you'd have 2 6 months apart. I think you could recognize both, and I think that'd be okay. I think that's fine. We have had more than one national champion more often than not, even in years where there seems to be far and away one team that should be allowed to claim a national championship, and yet we've had other teams that say, actually, we're the national champions, okay? We're the folks that 100% claim the banner. Look as far back as 2017, which is 3 years ago. Central Florida runs the table, goes undefeated with a win against Auburn in the Peach Bowl. And then you get Georgia and Alabama in the national championship game. Alabama gets the W. They are the college football playoff national champs. We got 2 national champions. I see nothing wrong with having 2 national champions in 1 year, provided that you play a spring season at all, which I'm still not certain that we're going to get. But as we continue to talk about it, I would definitely expect to hear that Dabo Swinney wants to win a national championship and claim a national championship, because that's how this would work, man. He actually has a valid point. If you're talking about national champions and you're talking about who's in them, you're talking about Clemson in the playoff era, which is to say that they'd be there anyway. And there's nothing about his football team that would lead you to believe that they would not win the ACC title again and that they would not run the table once again to get to the playoff. And then everybody seems to think that Clemson isn't any good. Then they go and beat Ohio State. Then they go and beat Notre Dame. Then they hand Alabama their head. And on it goes. So I think that he has a legitimate point. But if Clemson were not to make the college football playoff, and let's say you end up with Oklahoma, Alabama, and Central Florida, and Appalachian State. If Appalachian State wins the national championship, you bet nobody here is going to want to say that, especially if Appalachian State makes the playoff with 1 loss, right? You could have all sorts of chaos, and that's college football. College football is just weird, and it's crazy, and it's stupid, and it is hypocritical, and everything is open to dispute. So I could see a number of teams saying they got a legitimate claim at a national championship. Matter of fact, I could see one in which we have 3. Because let's say you end up with 3 SEC teams and 1 Big 12 team that ran the table in the playoff. And then you have a Central Florida or a Memphis or an SMU or Cincinnati or an Appalachian State or Coastal Carolina that goes undefeated and don't get invited to the playoff. They're going to claim a national championship, and they should, because nobody beat them. And I am a firm believer that if you did not catch an L, nobody can say that you're not the champ, which is the reason why I've always said we need to have a larger playoff. We need to have a 16 to 24 team playoff. 24 teams is what they do in the FCS. Nobody expects San Diego, who always comes out of the Pioneer League, to win a national championship. They're just not that good. But they get into the playoff, and then they get their head handed to them, and that's that. I think that everybody should have the same opportunity to get run ruled by Bama. If that's Appalachian State going to Tuscaloosa, fine. I want them to have a shot because I believe in meritocracy, and I believe that you are undefeated until somebody beats you. Thought that's what it always was going to be. What's weird is when we have these bowl ban seasons like the 2012 Ohio State team that I need to do a thing on because they go undefeated and they don't get a national championship because of previous transgressions. I'm sure that there are lots of Ohio State fans that want to claim 2012 as a national championship win for them, even as they did it again in 2014. It's just not going to happen. So if you can't actually acknowledge that Ohio State was one of the best teams in the country in 2012, despite not playing in a bowl ban, how are you going to be able to acknowledge or not acknowledge that whoever wins out of the Big Ten and the Pac-12 isn't a national champion? Or that one of these group of 5 teams that runs the table isn't a national champion? If you really want to know who the best is, you put them all in the same bracket and you say, have at it, guys. It's a tournament. But I encounter all sorts of elites who have nothing to say but, hey, they didn't play us and we don't think they're that good, so they shouldn't get a national championship, which is stupid.